Good morning. Welcome to United First Parish Church. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your journey, welcome to our Unitarian Universalist spiritual community. We are delighted to welcome anyone who may be visiting with us this morning. You can go to our website to learn more about our community, www.ufpc.org. I'm the Reverend Rebecca Froom, zooming into you this morning from our historic sanctuary here in the center of Quincy, on the traditional lands of the Neponset tribe of the Massachusetts people still here, still sovereign. Joining me in leading this Sunday service are our Director of Religious Education, Joan McDonald, our Music Director, Norman Corey, our digital usher, Clyde Courtwright, our digital greeter, Sarah Belfort. Additionally, Lisa Howe, our church president, will give a stewardship testimonial, and my own mother, Louise Lisi, who is a Unitarian Universalist in Philadelphia, will be joining me to give the chalice lighting reading soon. The order of service for this morning can be downloaded from our website, www.ufpc.org. We will also be pasting hymn lyrics in the chat as we go. For our online services, we encourage you to go ahead and leave your video on so that we can see one another in gallery view, especially during joys and sorrows. That said, we know that Zoom fatigue is very real. So go ahead and turn your camera off if that will help you be most present here this morning. And note that we are recording this morning's service to be posted on YouTube at a later date. And everyone is invited to stay online after the service for our virtual social hour. And now let us prepare our hearts, our minds, our bodies, our spirits for worship by taking a deep breath together. Feeling that spirit of life, that spirit of love that moves within, between, and beyond us all. We begin our service by lighting our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. If you have a chalice or a candle at home, you can go along and kindle the flame in your own home while my mother Louise reads our chalice lighting.
River Call by Reverend Manish Mishra Marzetti. Between rocking the boat and sitting down, between stirring things up and peaceably going along, we find ourselves here in community. Each called from many different journeys, many different life paths onto the river road. Some are here because the rocking of the boat has been too much tumult, too much uncertainty, too much pain. Some are here with questions about where the boat is going, how best to steer it, where the journey ends. Others are here as lovers of the journey, lovers of life itself. Here in front, beside, behind, each a passenger, each a captain, doing the best we can. Rest here in your boat with me, the river calls. Listen to how I flow, the sound of life coursing all around you. Let the current hold you. Let the current guide you. The river that gently flows through your soul whispers, come, let us worship.
Please join me in reading our covenant. The words are on the screen and in the chat. As a free fellowship of this historic church, we unite to lift our hearts and open our minds to a larger reality, to accept, support, and encourage one another, to seek the wisdom in all religions, to cherish and sustain the web of life, and to strive for justice, compassion, and peace. And now, let us raise our voices in song to sing hymn number 108, My Life Flows On.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the reel of far-off hymn that hails a new creation. Through tempest stormy roars, I know the truth and liveth. What though the darkness round me flows, source in the light it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, or to the rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are ringing. Send friends with shame or undefiled, how can I keep from singing? How can I keep from singing?
This morning, I want to share with you a story that I've fictionalized a little bit, but it is a true story. And it was told to me by the superintendent of schools in Yarmouth on Cape Cod. There once was a little boy who lived in a small house with his little sister and his dad on Cape Cod. He was in the 3rd grade. At his school, they had a special program that taught everyone how to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is paying attention to what is happening in the present moment. It may be paying attention to what you're feeling, what you're hearing, or anything else that you might notice. There's no special place of calm that you have to reach. And it's not about clearing your mind. It's just an honest look at what you're experiencing at this moment. So twice a week for 8 weeks, the children and the teachers at his school learned how to practice mindfulness. And they learned how to pay attention to their bodies and their feelings. And they learned that practicing mindfulness could help, especially when they were feeling scared or anxious about anything. Well, one night, the boy, his dad, and sister woke up to the shrill sound of a smoke detector. And there was smoke in the house, and they were able to get out safely. But the little girl was really scared, and she was crying and crying. And the little boy was scared too, but he could hear the fire engines coming, and they were going to help put the fire out. As he sat huddled close to his sister, he remembered about practicing mindfulness when you're feeling scared. So he quietly talked to his sister and had her copy his movements and breathing, and soon they were both feeling calmer while the fire department put out the fire. The mindfulness exercise that he used was called shark fin calming, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So if you sit comfortably in your chair or on the floor, and you put your hands in your lap or maybe on your knees, and you sit up nice and tall, and if you close your eyes and focus on your breathing and find your breath moving in and out of your body. And if you take a breath in through your nose and slowly let it out through your mouth. Now, if you raise your hand and you put it to your face like this, and so it kind of looks like a shark fin. And as you move your hand down, you're going to breathe out, shh. So if you close your eyes, take a breath in through your nose, and as you move your hand down, just make that shh sound. Shh. And we'll do it 3 times. And if you notice, just letting that breath out and hearing that sound, how calming it is in your body. So if there's any time when you're feeling stressed or anxious, that might be a way to calm yourself and pay attention more about how your body is reacting to stress.
Through the sharing of our joys and sorrows, we create a sacred space where we are deeply present with ourselves and one another, knowing that a sorrow shared is a sorrow diminished, and a joy shared is a joy magnified. If you wish to briefly acknowledge a sorrow or a joy from your heart, I invite you to raise your hand and unmute your microphone when our digital usher calls you by name. Let us open our hearts to one another. As we end our sharing, I will light a final candle, representing all of those joys and all of those sorrows that we hold silently in the sanctuary of our hearts. May the light of these candles and the compassion of this community remind us that wherever we are on our journey, each of us is worthy of love, and each of us is able to love. Let us take a deep breath together, rolling our shoulders back, finding a comfortable seat in our chair, our couch, walking our kitchen floor. Let us breathe in together, breathe out, releasing just a bit of tension from our jaw, our hands, our hearts, and breathing together. Let us share a brief time of silent meditation. Will you lift your hearts and join me in the spirit of prayer, listening in these words for the language of faith most meaningful to you? Eternal presence, known by many names, known in many ways. We gather this morning as the fullness of spring unfolds around us in asparagus and fiddleheads and the blooming and blossoming of trees and bushes. We give thanks for this community and all the communities that sustain us. Give thanks for the ability to connect screen to screen, heart to heart, and sometimes increasingly in the presence of one another as spring continues to unfold around us, bringing not only flowers, but increasing vaccinations, each holding the promise of continuing and bettered health, safety. We give thanks for births and birthdays, all the ways we celebrate together. We give thanks for the sounds of children in our yards, on the streets, in our hearts, on the screen. And we hold in care all of those in and beyond our community who are struggling with their health, facing new or unknown diagnoses, recovering from surgery, from cancer. We wish comfort, health, healing, strength for all of those on a rocky journey of health and healing. Spirit of life, spirit of love. In this season where in this country, people are slowly able to safely remove their masks and see one another eye to eye and smile to smile. We know that the pandemic continues to rage around the world. May we find within ourselves the space for joy and the space for compassion. We pray this in love's name. Amen, and blessed be. Our reflection music this morning is the song Meditation on Breathing by Sarah Dan Jones. It is performed by Blue Cliff Monastery Ensemble, a monastery out of the Buddhist tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh. Join in or just let the words wash over you.
Breathe out. Breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out.
One of my simple joys in life is to eat an apple while hiking. Eating an apple so full of sweetness, so juicy and full of water. Eating this apple after hiking, being in nature, using my body. It's this wondrous moment where all of my senses seem to connect, and the flesh of the apple in all of its beauty, all of its sweetness and nourishment reminds me of the sweetness, the beauty, the nourishment that we hold in our own bodies and is held in the body of the earth. I also enjoy eating an apple in my own home, but being outside to eat that apple becomes something precious. Last year, as the pandemic set in and the restrictions were present in Massachusetts and beyond, it seemed that one of the only things we could safely do was walk outside with a mask. It was safe enough to walk. And so I found myself in the Blue Hills as much as possible. It was an active place. Many people had also turned to the embrace of nature to find a way to nourish their bodies and their spirits. And I would pack my apple, hike with my bandana on, and then step a little off the trail, carefully making sure I did not bother the earth too much. Remove my mask and eat this apple, remembering the precious, familiar, normal, wondrous experience of an apple. It was a centering moment within the anxiety and the disorientation of the early months of the pandemic. Months when it was hard for me to focus, as it likely was for you. I'd pull out a journal and not be able to write. I would open a book and read the same pages 5 times over. Now we are in this turning point in the pandemic in this country. And yet there is still so much that feels hard in our hearts, in our bodies. I see it when we check in at the beginning of committee meetings and small groups. There is this weariness that we carry with us alongside the joy, the gratitude, the hope of this moment. Krista Tippet, who runs the radio program and podcast On Being, found herself also conversing with friends and colleagues about how in this moment, she writes, the COVID tunnel is tenuous, the end of the COVID tunnel is tenuously appearing, yet we feel as exhausted as at any time in the past year. Memory problems, short fuses, sudden drops into what feels frighteningly to me like depression, and fractured productivity that alternately puzzles and shames us. We are at once excited and unnerved by the prospect of life opening up again. And so Krista Tippet, in each of her shows, she interviews someone about the life of the spirit, the religious life, the spiritual life, religious leaders, artists, scientists. And so as she notices this ongoing feeling of exhaustion, even in this moment of hope, Krista Tippet calls upon the clinical psychologist Christine Runyan, searching to shed light, as she writes, on the psychic and psychological and spiritual effects of a year of pandemic and social isolation. Tippet and Runyan talk about how the pandemic has disrupted our mind-body connection. Does some of this resonate for you? Do you perhaps hear these stories, your own stories within these stories? Perhaps feel in your own body that mixed experience of excitement and exhaustion. Over the course of this interview, psychologist Christine Runyan talks about how our nervous system has been responding to this period of prolonged stress and trauma. She talks about how the pandemic has activated our nervous system stress response that can take form in flight, fight, freeze. Each of these are a form of activating our nervous system to protect ourselves in response to a danger. What about the stresses that are not in acute danger, but a danger that lasts much longer, like 14 months of quarantine and isolation, so many losses that have been ungrieved? What about a lifetime of living with microaggressions based on your gender, your skin color, the part of the world or country you might be from? Those stresses are not acute, cannot end overnight. And what about the over 400 years of oppression of Black and Brown people on the corner of the earth that we call the United States of America? Those dangers, those stresses do not leave the body easily. The events of this past year, from the pandemic to a reckoning with the white supremacy culture in our society, show that we have been experiencing a form of collective trauma, a trauma that perhaps for some of us began before this pandemic. The collective traumas of income inequality, of hunger, and now the collective trauma of living with, living through, dying from COVID-19. We've had to return to some amount of life in a way that's different than that acute moment of last spring, and yet the danger has not fully subsided, and so our bodies are confused. Runyan writes, if we can understand and appreciate what we are experiencing at the level of our nervous system, whoever you are, whatever you are feeling, of course you realize, of course you are feeling that looking at our current conditions. And that's a normal response to incredibly unfamiliar, unusual, unpredictable, and uncontrollable circumstances. When life gives us a danger that does not recede, when life gives us a stress that continues far beyond a day or a week, how do we go on? What gets us through? Tippet and Runyan in this interview talk about how this trauma has severed the mind-body connection. And so one of the things that can get us through is to actively work to restore that connection, to work with our nervous system, even when it is incredibly hard, because what has happened has caused it to be hard to connect with our body and our nervous system. And so this is a time in this second pandemic spring where we can train our senses and use our senses to reconnect the mind and body. Sometimes we can turn to formal spiritual disciplines like meditation, like prayer, to connect our mind and body. We often think of those exercises as being mental or spiritual, but they are physical. So much of meditation and prayer begins in the breath. So here in the middle of the sermon, let us again take a deep breath together, noticing how that gift of oxygen moves in and through our body, letting the breath remind us that we have a body. Breath is always something we can return to build a little bit of that connection between mind and body, that connection that calms our nervous system, that opens our awareness, that reminds us that even when life is incredibly hard, there is the possibility of making it through. The novelist, the writer, Barbara Kingsolver, has written, "In my own worst seasons, I've come back from the colorless world of despair by forcing myself to look hard for a long time at a single glorious thing. A flame of red geranium outside my bedroom window, and then another, my daughters and another, the perfect outline of a full dark sphere behind the crescent moon, until I learn to be in love with my life again. Like a stroke victim retraining new parts of the brain to grasp lost skills, I have taught myself joy over and over and over again." This pandemic era has brought us new skills, taught us new skills, Zoom and so much more. And this pandemic era has also had us lose skills, the ability to smile, the ability to hug. There is so much that our nervous system has lost. And yet here, in this space of community where we honor hope as well as loss, we can remind ourselves of our ability to retrain our bodies, to appreciate all those joyous, wondrous sensations. So friends on the journey, my invitation to you this week, this season, is to work with your nervous system and choose to activate your nervous system, not by fear or anxiety, but by connection. Taste the apple. Look at the red geranium. Put your phone down, take a deep breath, and listen to what you hear. You may find yourself remembering skills of connection. You may find yourself building new skills to connect the mind and body. But it takes practice. So friends on the journey, I hope that for you and for all of us in this season of hope, we can act on that hope by opening all of our senses to what is beyond fear, to the beauty and the wonders of ordinary life when we take the time to stop and savor an apple. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be. Our anthem this morning is the song Heart Wide Open, arranged by Leah Morris.
Oops.
Keep your heart wide open, though the waves wanna push you around. You've got to keep your heart wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. I'm gonna keep your heart. I'm gonna keep wide open. I'm gonna keep my heart wide open. Though the waves want to push around. Though the waves want to push me around. I'm gonna keep your heart. I'm gonna keep wide open. I'm gonna keep my heart wide open till my faith brings me back to solid ground. Till my faith brings me back to solid ground. I'm gonna keep your heart. I'm gonna keep wide open. I'm gonna keep my heart wide open. Though the waves want to push around. Though the waves want to push me around. I'm gonna keep your heart. I'm gonna keep wide open. I'm gonna keep my heart wide open till my faith brings me back to solid ground. Till my faith brings me back to solid ground.
Each spring during our pledge drive in church year, we ask a member or friends of the congregation to give a brief testimonial about what this church means to them and why they make a financial commitment to our United First Parish Church community. Today, we hear from Lisa Howe.
Thank you, Rebecca. I didn't grow up going to church on a regular basis. We occasionally went to our local UU church for Easter service or the occasional Sunday school. My wife, Liz, grew up Catholic and joined a UU church after we'd been together for about 10 years, saying that she missed having a church community. I didn't know what she was talking about. I tagged along and realized that it was great to have an hour a week to ponder deeper issues. And more importantly, I realized the importance of the church community. I felt welcome at UFPC from the first time I came to a service. I started attending in earnest the Sunday after Trump was elected. People were immediately friendly, but not pushy. As an introvert, I appreciated being given the space to participate in my own time and in my own way. I've been here for almost 5 years, and I continue to be struck by the kindness of this community. As we begin to emerge from COVID-imposed physical separation from one another, I'm incredibly grateful for the virtual connection and support of this community over the last year. We've navigated this exile pretty well, considering the unprecedented circumstances. This congregation has shown up for each other, whether it's attending or helping to run worship services, sending cards of support and condolence to friends, joining the Quincy for Black Lives standouts, or the Board of Governors meeting weekly and sometimes more often in the early days of the pandemic. I have to say, it's the first time I've gotten not one, but several condolence cards for the loss of a beloved cat. It's this community's ability to show up for each other that makes me want to volunteer my time and to give financial support to UFPC. I thank you all and encourage you to find your own meaningful ways to participate in the stewardship of this community. And now we'll have our offertory. This season, as we look ahead and consider our financial commitment to this congregation in the coming year, we continue to take a weekly offering to support the congregation in the present. This congregation strives to do life-affirming, life-transforming work in our hearts, our communities, and the larger web of life of which we are a part. Please take this moment to visit our website and consider clicking on the donate button located on the homepage of our website, www.ufpc.org. May these gifts to support the good works of United First Parish Church be joyfully given and gratefully received. And now enjoy the music of Matt Myers.
To ground us for our words of benediction, I invite you to place your hands over your heart, connecting your own mind and spirit and body to itself. And as we take another deep breath together, let us hear these words by Reverend Mark Bellatini. Go in peace. Live simply, gently, at home in yourselves. Act justly. Speak justly. Remember the depth of your own compassion. Forget not your power in the days of your powerlessness. Do not strive to be wealthier than your peers, and stint not your hand of charity. Practice forbearance. Speak the truth or speak not. Take care of yourselves as bodies, for you are a good gift. Crave peace for all people in the world, beginning with yourselves, and go as you go, with the dream of that peace alive in your heart. May we go in peace and go in love to be a blessing to the world. Join me in singing Carry the Flame as we extinguish our chalice. As we heard in our stewardship testimonial, there are many ways to connect with and support our community here at United First Parish Church. Our announcements are available to be downloaded from our website and are emailed to the congregation on Thursday or Friday. Some of our weekly or bi-weekly programs, of course, include our children's chapel services on YouTube and the Thursday afternoon standout of Quincy for Black Lives. Today the writing group is meeting for their monthly meeting in this very Zoom room at noon. I'm looking for Jim. That's still true today, Jim? Great. So writing group at noon. It's a wonderful way to also be connecting body and mind and spirit through the creative act of writing. And looking ahead, we are